I'm going to go to a concept that we use in the remarkable practice called the Rubik's Cube. So we
Mhm.
use a Rubik's Cube because if you mess up one side, you mess up all the sides. The Rubik's Cube in order is vision, leadership, systems, people, training, and energy. So vision, what does success look like for you and your practice? What does success look like for your practice? It's always that vision first. Then it's leadership. What kind of person do you need to be? What kind of leader do you need to be to achieve that vision? Then it's systems. What are the systems that need to be run through your leadership to achieve that vision? That's where the systems part is so important. Then it's people. Do you have the right people on your team, the right person in the right seat, doing the right work the right way? Then it's training. It's training the people through those systems, through your leadership to achieve that vision, and then energy. Energy is everything. So when you go through, most of the time, if the vision is clear and if they're being a clear leader, it is a systems issue. And if you have a system around everything, your practice becomes highly valuable. Systems are so important.
Malcolm Rudd, welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. How are you, my friend?
I am very well, thank you, Angus. Great to be here.
Buddy, it's lovely to share this stage, this platform with you. You and I have shared time on boards and in different groups over the last 2 decades.
Yes.
There hasn't been a lot of opportunities like this where we've got to kind of break bread over a topic. We're going to be talking today about how do we increase the value of our practice if we have an exit in mind. So if you're thinking of selling your practice one day in the future, this episode is for you as well. But before we dive into that, can you give a thumbnail in terms of the journey that brought you to where you are right now?
Yeah, so like a lot of chiropractors, I started as an associate. I started as an associate in the practice that had helped me through school, and I started getting chiropractic since I was in grade three. But I was an associate first, always had the passion to have my own practice. So then I went into my own practice. I purchased a satellite practice, worked within two, with the intention of buying that satellite practice, which I set in place. So when I bought that practice, it was seeing 20 people a week. I built it up significantly. Then when I owned it, went massive. Then I realized that I thought, oh, I can't do any busier than this. So I hired the first person who had a heartbeat and a license, and I hired them as an associate. And I learned through scar tissue that that's not how the way to hire someone. Then I ended up getting coached myself by the late great John Hinwood, and he really exploded it. So as some of the yourself and some of the listeners, viewers may know, um, uh, John. Well, when you talk to John, you end up as a coaching client, and it just exploded my practice. So down the track, I became a coach and mentor myself. I've had four practices, 10 associates now because I coach and train chiropractors all over the world. I mostly am coaching. I have one practice location with 5 associates. It is an associate-run practice. It is highly valuable if you're talking about a exit sort of program and building value.
One of the things that I noticed about you from when we both got to sit on the ASRF board, the Spinal Research Board, is that you have a really strong systems brain.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Has that always been there for you, or is that something that you developed?
A bit of both, yeah. I'm not sure if yourself have you heard of Wealth Dynamics by Roger Hamilton. Have you heard of
No.
that assessment tool? Um, in his assessment tool, it comes up with 6 types of people. And when I did that assessment, actually, John Hinwood got the whole team to do that at the time. I was what's called a mechanic. A mechanic is
Yep.
someone who takes a system and makes it better. That's my skill set. I didn't know that was my skill set until then.
Mm.
And it is something that I have managed to do. Whenever I go into through business or with coaching and so forth, I see how something can be improved. That's just my personality. I did not know it was there. I developed that over time.
Mm.
Yes.
It's not, and that's something I recognized in you immediately. Then I started to kind of see you. And it's not a skill set that I think that most chiropractors have, and it's not the reason why most of us kind of go into practice. There's this desire to want to help people,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do the thing to it. The technician, as is often kind of, the e-myth, if we look at it from that point of view as well. Um, Tell me more about the mechanic side of things and why is that a valuable skill set for chiropractors to have?
Yeah. Because within practice, I'm going to go to a concept that we use in the remarkable practice called the Rubik's Cube. So we
Hmm.
use a Rubik's Cube because if you mess up one side, you mess up all the sides. So the Rubik's Cube in order is vision, leadership, systems, people, training, and energy. So if you think about it, if a business owner out there, if you can use it as a troubleshooting tool or you can use it as a tool for planning. So vision, what does success look like for you and your practice? What does success look like for your practice? It's always that vision first. Then it's leadership. What kind of person do you need to be? What kind of leader do you need to be to achieve that vision? Then it's systems. What are the systems that need to be run through your leadership to achieve that vision? That's where the systems part is so important. And it's in that order: vision, leadership, systems. Then it's people. Do you have the right people on your team, the right person in the right seat, doing the right work the right way? So, people. Do you have the right people in the right positions on your team who are running those systems through your leadership to achieve that vision? Then it's training. Training the people through those systems, through your leadership to achieve that vision, and then energy. Energy is everything. So if something's going wrong in the practice, let's just say, for argument's sake, that you're not getting new patients into your practice. First thing, is your whole team clear on what success looks like in that area? Are, are, are yourself as a business owner, the people you've empowered on your team to be leaders, are they clear of what success looks like in that area? Are they being the right kind of person, the right kind of leader to do that? Then it's systems. Do you have a system around attraction? So a system around internal referrals, around external referrals, around digital. I mean, internal can be broken into three even there. So organic, campaign driven, and process driven referrals. Do you have a system around all these things of attraction? And so when you go through, most of the time, what we find is if the vision is clear and if they're being a clear leader, it is a systems issue. And if you
Mm.
have a system around everything, your practice becomes highly valuable because someone can come in and run that system and now they can take it on from there and improve it from there if they want to. Systems are so important. And that's where a lot of them fail, is the system. Is everything written down? Is there a system of attraction? Is there a system of conversion? Is there a system of retention? Is there a system of team building? Systems is very important to make a practice valuable.
And contrast that to what most practices are built upon is really um, often, at best, a charismatic leader
Yes.
who has all of the ideas inside their head. They may or may not have a great associates or front desk staff there also. And it really is kind of run on a whim. Let me take it back to, because I want to share a response here. A month or so ago, I posted in a Aussie-based kind of chiro group over here. I've been having lots of conversations recently with clients about valuing a practice
Mm.
and realizing that some of the ways that I used to think about it have really changed. And went, oh, let me put it out here to see what the group has kind of said there too. Um, and your response was the historical way in Australia was based on a percentage of gross over the last 3 years. There have been in more recent years a shift towards looking at profitability of the business, not just percentage of collections as well. Okay. And you kind of go on to say there are 20 value drivers that increase the sales multiple. The higher the multiple of the value for the seller there too. And this is when I kind of reached out to you with this idea of saying, let's have a discussion in around things that how do I increase the value of my practice? Because there's one way or another that the general trend towards valuing a practice now is going to be based on multiples or maybe even a percentage of profit there as
Mm.
well. So the higher that we can have our profit, that's one way we can look at it. But that's not all out there too, because if I'm selling you a practice and you're going to buy the practice and all the staff is going to be the same, you don't want to move in there and I don't want to move out there too. That practice is much more valuable than one that you buy with me, built around my personality as Angus, and then I leave as well. So let's talk a little bit around the idea of what can we do to increase the value of our practice for when an exit strategy comes along.
Yeah. So as you said, classically, and practices are now valued on a range. So the percentage of revenue, that's still a number you can come to. But as I said, it's sold on a range between that number and another number. So if you were to buy a practice, would you agree that there are practices that may have great collections, so great revenue, but they have very high expenses as well? So which would you buy?
100%.
One that has very high turnover, but it has a lot of expenses as well, or would you like one where it's very clear what the profit is, what it's doing, and a multiple of that amount. Which one do you want?
Yeah, we want the second one. And the first one is based a lot around ego, and we
Yes.
like to share a lot of that. But at the end of the day, it's dollars in our pocket.
Yes. Yeah. Because I mean, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash flow is king.
Nice.
Revenue is vanity, as you said. That's the ego. That's I've got a this $1 million practice. I've got this. I've got whatever else. But the profit is sanity. So what when someone goes into a business, if you think because a practice is not bought, it's sold. How do you build it to sell it? Is the
Mm,
conversation people should be thinking. And what a seller is going to come in and they are going to be looking at a thing called arbitrage. Arbitrage is the difference between what this business is doing right now to what I think I can get that to. How can I improve it on that? So it's they're willing to pay a multiple of a profit and they think I can my return on this investment of buying this profit, I can get this money back over this time frame based on this. So it's a multiple. So the first number that you need if you're looking at what is the value of my practice? In fact, just an hour ago, I was having this exact conversation with someone. They were thinking, what is my practice worth? I'm not an official value, but I've got a pretty good idea.
mm,
Is I said it's the average so it's your seller's discretionary earnings, often referred to as owner's discretionary earnings for most practices. A professionally managed business or practice is sold on a beta, so earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, so a beta. So it's done on that. Most practices are not professionally managed. A professional managed business is one where the accountability, they're not on the accountability grid. They're an owner and they're not doing any functions within the business. It's professionally managed across the board. There's very few practices like that. So what practices are valued on is a multiple of seller's discretionary earnings. Seller's discretionary earnings. What are you earning as the owner for the work that you do within the practice?
yep.
What are the distributions of profit that you have, like real profit from the
Hmm.
business, plus the add backs? And
Yes.
so add backs, you might run a car through the business. There's a percentage that is an add back. Some of it's true. It might be the printer paper that you take home for your printer. There's lots of them. There's add backs.
Well, let's clarify that point. There are some costs that we want the taxman to see, and there's some that we kind of use it at home there too. So maybe you buy all of your books and they're reference books,
Yes.
but really so depending on who we're talking to, they're those sorts of things that we would take out. Like, is your mobile phone really a business expense?
Yeah.
You know, is your internet at home really a business expense? Sure, you do some sort of thing. So, we're going to take out what is the profit of the practice? What now from this too? If the principal is actually in the practice and they're earning revenue for adjusting people,
Mhm.
do we leave that in there or is that part of the income as well?
Yeah. So when we're looking at a thing called RPE or revenue per employee. So if you're doing revenue per employee, you leave the chiropractor out.
Okay.
So it's what is the revenue per employee? And we roughly we look at 250,000 per of revenue per full-time equivalent. So if someone is doing less than 15 hours a week, we class that as a one third. If it is
Okay.
between 15 hours and 13 hours a week, so and 30 hours a week, we class that as a two-thirds employee. If they're 30 plus, they're a full-time. And this works whether it's in Australian dollars, New Zealand dollars, US dollars. It's around between 250 and 300. Between 250 and 350 dollars, 250,000 per full-time equivalent. So you leave the owner out of that. When you're looking at the seller's discretionary earnings, you leave it into that valuation because yes, someone coming in. So if the chiropractor is adjusting, like in my practice, I adjust around 8% of the volume. Yes,
Hmm.
someone coming in would have to adjust 8 hours, but they got all these other people who are adjusting for them anyway. So you leave that in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take me back because I'm a little confused about your 250, 350K there. I mean, obviously that would be based on, you might have an associate in there that's working 30 hours, but they
Mhm.
might not even be generating half that amount of income. Where
Yeah.
do those numbers come in?
Okay. So if you do the maths, just as I said before, so if they're doing less than 15 to 30 or 30 plus, if you do the maths and it is way short of that, say it's 100,000 per full-time equivalent or it's 150, we
Yep.
call that wide. wide but thin, meaning
Yes.
that there's more you can get out of this practice to
Ah, yes.
actually build it.
Yeah.
If it comes in that you have that you're at 400,000 or something, you're you're thin but deep
Yes.
because it can topple. You lose that key employee, and now you're stuffed. You don't want to be either, do you? So
Right.
and we call them break points. So a break point is if let's just say you're at 250,000 or 300,000, 500,000 of revenue, and let's just say you're right on the money there. If that's where you're on the money, you got to actually invest into past that break point to actually grow the practice. A lot of practices stagnate because they do not have enough team members on their team. But you don't want to have too many on your team because that's the he said, she said, whatever. Nothing gets done. So
Okay. So from that, and I know we're going to get, and I try not to get too much into the weeds here on this, but
yes,
this has opened up a door that if we have an associate in our practice, if they're working 30 hours, the sweet spot we want to have a look and say, look, are they generating somewhere between 250 and 350K of income? And if they are, then that's okay. We've got some stability there in terms of less than that. Okay, we've got some room for growth with them.
Mhm.
If they're more than that, that it's great for the practice, but it could actually be a liability because it's sort of coming from one particular person should they walk out the door. Is that what you
Yeah.
mean from that?
To a degree. So this is CAs and DCs. Yes, you're going to have some chiropractors who are generating way more than that for the practice, and there's some will be less than that. So it's overall. So
Oh, right.
really,
So this is across the number stuff, a whole
the whole lot.
practice.
Yep, the whole
Got it.
practice. Yep, over the whole practice. So this is if you've got front desk CAs, or we refer to them as check-in CAs or check-out CAs. We do, and it might be the one person doing both of those roles. But as a practice matures, you may split that in two because they're two different personalities for someone who is the boss of today and someone who is the boss of tomorrow. So as a practice matures, you can split the roles. But that 250,000 per full-time employee is all of those people together, all of them.
Got it.
So look at the CAs, look at the DCs. So yes, I mean obviously you want your DCs to be as busy as possible. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, yes. And so as a part of this, when we're looking at this figure as well, if those numbers are less than that, 250 per person, does
yeah.
that likely going to lead to, because then it means there's possibly more room for growth. So is that going to make a practice more valuable or less valuable then?
If it's below that number, less valuable because the team
Yes.
is not optimized, not
Yes.
professionalized, not optimized, not yeah. So there's more you can get out of each employee. It's wide, but there's more potential of that
And if
business.
it's over that amount, let's just say it is around that
Yeah,
450K,
yeah.
what would that tell you about a business?
There's exposure because if
Yes.
it's over and if there's not a reason for it, let's say you've got, I'm just going to keep it as a single practice right here. If that's at that level, then potentially you have key players. So either there's key players who are doing way too much work, and if
Yes.
one of those people leaves, that leads to exposure. So
Yes.
it may be time to hire your next A player.
Yep.
Yeah,
Love it. Okay. Good sidestep through regards to there too.
yeah,
Okay.
because you've got to
So
have
now,
if you think you've got to have some daylight for people to grow into.
yes.
And if everyone's at capacity, there's no daylight to grow further. So we call them break points, is most practices will not go past that point until they have their next A player on board. So if it was at let's say if it's at 300,000, you may be thinking about this. If you're at 400,000, I'd be thinking you need another person on your team. Could be a tech CA, could be a CA role, could be a DC role. You have to look at the individual needs of the practice.
Yeah, love it. Okay. So we've got that as a consideration in terms of how we're valuing the practice. The
Mhm.
other factor that we've done there in terms is we've worked out in terms of what is the profitability of the practice minus some of the buybacks and all those things. Now, independent of those two things, because we could have two practices with the same profitability and the
Mhm.
same numbers. One is just me working by myself,
Mhm.
okay? And the other is me working along with three other chiropractors. And maybe as you mentioned beforehand, I'm seeing 5% of the patient volume from the two. And then when you come and buy the practice, I'm leaving, but my three associates are staying.
Mhm.
Those practices, even though they might have the same profit from them, and they might even have those same kind of numbers in terms of value per person in them, My
Mhm.
contention would be that second practice is a lot more valuable than the
It is.
first. Would I
It
be
is.
right?
Yes, that's what we call leveraged operations. It's one
Yes.
of the value drivers. So if it is all you, no one wants to buy your job.
Yes.
No one wants to buy your job. And even practices that are quite successful and it's been based on one person's personality or whatever, that they've built up, whether it's technique, whether what it is. Someone coming in, they're thinking, this is based on this person. When I buy this, they're going to want that person. There's going to be a significant drop, as opposed to someone coming in where they're buying someone who's doing all of this work and they're staying. Of course, it's more valuable. That's
Mm.
leveraged operations. That is one of the value drivers that you need to look at. If you don't have associates in there, if you want your practice to be valuable whenever you want to sell it, and you'll never regret building it to sell it, ever, because it's more profitable on the way anyway.
Yes. Yeah. And so part of this, when I'm often talking to people about it, like, let's just say, for instance, that you're into cheeseburgers from McDonald's. We know that I'm going to get basically the same cheeseburger here in WA, in LA, in New York, in Christchurch. It's more or less going to be the same.
Mhm.
But if I'm after a chiropractic adjustment, it's not that same thing. It is a relationship. And, coming from somebody who had 20 years of a practice, and I feel like I did a really great job educating my practice members. The fact of the matter is that practice now, 4 years after I've sold it, is a shell of what it was beforehand, for several reasons there too. But a lot of it is because I'm no longer there anymore to
Yeah,
push it.
yeah, yeah. And this is a common thing we see, right? It is a common thing that we see. So there's two types of practices that we look at. We use a street as an example. The lines in the middle of a street
Yep.
or a highway. So you can have a double white line where there's no crossover. So
Mm-hmm.
people get in, they're accountable, responsible for their attraction, conversion, retention of their people, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a dotted white line practice. A dotted white line practice is where there's free flow between the associates. So a dotted white line practice in the end down the track is actually more valuable than a solid double white line for the
Yes.
same reason you just said. So
Yep.
the thing to do is actually to, as much as possible, to make it normal for people who come into the practice to see multiple practitioners. They're coming for chiropractic, not to
Mm-hmm.
see a chiropractor. And
Yes.
there's systems around this. How do you create this more? It's not going to be everyone, but the higher the percentage, the better.
Yeah. And so, in terms of doing that, because this is something we've worked very hard at our practice. So there's Lauren and two other chiros there. And whilst there's a preference that most patients
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
they're also really happy when one takes a holiday to go elsewhere, or if they
Mhm.
can't get to that appointment time. Now, part of the thing that we've done to help out with that too is that the visits are very similar. Like, they all
Mhm.
adjust in the same way. They have the
Yeah.
same opening routine, they have the same closing routine of how they do it. So we purposely don't want a chiropractor. The girls tend to be a lower force practice. We don't want somebody coming in with a heavy. So all these things we put in place that makes our practice members really comfortable kind of switching across. And so if you have a practice out there with associates and your associates are focused on building their own practice and they are that double white line, then that
Mhm.
might be something that you start to address sooner
Yes.
rather than later.
Yeah. And my practice, with all transparency, my practice used to be that double white line practice. And
Yes.
if I went away, 50% of people wouldn't come in. That's
Yep.
not cool.
No.
So I've deliberately put systems in place to change that over time. And
So
they're,
what have you done? What have you done to move the needle on that? I shared some of the things that we've done in our
yeah,
practice to help move
yeah,
that needle. What have you done to help to change that?
yeah. So probably the key one is to make sure they have multiple exposure very early on in care with multiple practitioners. So as a system, meaning that when someone says yes to care, that one or more of their visits is with another practitioner in that early part of care. So they start to get the idea of it. And I always remember when I first started doing this, I had one of the people that I converted, and they referred to me, and with our process, she saw, I think it was three different practitioners, and she said to me, she said, when I come here, I get exactly the same experience no matter which person I see. And she
Yeah,
said, that's
gold.
great. That's what you want. So it's multiple
That's
exposure.
How do you go about managing that from a clinical point of view? That's one of the challenges that we have.
Mhm.
Um, is the clinical side of things there and having somebody responsible ultimately for that person's care.
Yep.
How do you solve that?
Yep. Comes down to training, Rubik's Cube.
Yes.
So making sure that, and I love what you said before, there's the same start, there's the same end, because what you do in the middle may be slightly different. Everyone has a different set of hands and so forth. But
Mm,
if you start the same way, if you end the same way, and everyone knows this because you've trained on this, they're
mm,
more likely to feel comfortable. If you start a particular way and the next practitioner comes in and they start in a completely different position, this person's
mm.
thinking, oh, this person, they're not doing right. Yeah. Dr. Angus, he doesn't do it like that. It's now creating doubt in their mind. So it's training. Training. You have to train on how you want a regular visit done. Note taking. You have to have really good notes so that anyone who's seeing those notes can replicate you, sort of like a chameleon, when they're seeing that other person. It's whether you're note taking, if you're using, as most chiropractors do, use code. So
Mm.
for what you're doing, the technique you're doing, all those sort of things. That make sure that this is expectations and agreements with the practitioners that they are going to follow those notes if they are not the preferred provider, if you like. Um, and what the system we have in practice is if they find something else, write in the notes so that the preferred provider knows about it. If there's been a new injury, of course they do whatever they find, of course. But as
Yes.
much as possible, they are subbing in as that, sub like in the relay
Yep.
race. They're doing whatever that person did as close as possible to that.
Yep. And I think there'll be some of us listening to this, and I would have in the early days got hung up because we all have patients that have made that decision that they only want to see us.
Yeah.
Okay. But my contention is that probably, and I'm being super conservative here, at most they're 20% of your practice. And to be honest, I think they're probably less than 5% if you do it really well. So
Yeah.
there's going to be some people that no matter what you do and how well you set it up, and you could clone yourself, if it's not you, they won't come and see you. But let's not worry about those because there's at least 80% of people that would be very happy to participate in this style of practice.
Yes.
Would that be fair?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's that 80/20 rule, 80/20 rule, Pareto principle. But as you said, if you have the system in place, you can get it much less. I think I've done the analysis and I've been in practice for 31 years. The analysis I've done is there are 40 individual patients who have not seen another practitioner in my practice. 40 total.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Total.
Okay. So we've shared one thing here in terms of, first of all, get some associates. So it's not just
Yeah.
you in there. Second, if you get some associates, it's important that there be crossover between the patients.
Yes.
At least this allows you to go on a holiday without your practice crashing and them also. So it keeps
Yeah.
that revenue stable across. And again, a couple of things here. Not only is this really great for you and your business, but it also means that if you're taking a 6 week break, that your practice members aren't having 6 weeks off their care as well. It's good
Correct.
for them also. So what
Yeah.
else can we do to increase the value? If we're building a practice to increase its value, what are these other drivers that we could implement?
Yeah, so we have in high level, we've sort of talked about some of them. So you want to have systems of attraction, systems of conversion, systems of
Mm.
retention. And this doesn't live in the owner's head. We know that a
Yep.
lot of chiropractors we get in, and we're like pirates, as a pirate who just is the king of wing, they can, or queen of wing, they just get in there and do it. It's all in their head. It has to be written down. These systems have to be written down or it doesn't exist. So what you want to do is create a battleship. I mean, you can't fire a cannon from a rowboat, can you? You need to be a battleship.
Yep.
So your systems are critical, so that you've got training systems and reporting systems and meeting rhythms and everything is systematized. That's just ticking off some of the value drivers. And a lot of people go, well, how do I find a system? These things exist. You just got to create a system. You have to
Mm.
create a system. Um, and it all has to be written down in manual so everyone can follow it. That's a battleship. Do you think a battleship that's out there, do you think it has role descriptions? Do you think it has all these things in there of what they're meant to be
Yes.
doing?
Yeah.
KPIs, maybe?
Can you share some of the big systems that you see are necessary in terms of what area would you actually systematize in your practice?
Everything.
Okay.
The big systems. So the big systems, we know that the four major areas of any chiropractic practice is
Yep.
attraction,
Yep.
conversion, retention, and team building. They're the major systems if you're looking high level.
Yep.
The one that is often missing in practices is reporting systems. So people don't set KPIs. They have no idea what their numbers are. They don't know how to track how their attraction is working. They don't know how to troubleshoot it because they don't know what the numbers are. They don't break it
Yep.
down into internal, external, and digital and set goals and KPIs towards that. And conversion systems, they're not breaking it down into the parts. So when you have this and when you have it systematized, someone coming can say, oh, I can see your attraction system. And it's this, and that. I can see your conversion system. And you've been tracking this over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I can see the trends that are happening here. Now it's valuable.
Yep. So in our practice, and I was just checking them out here too. We have 7 systems, and so this is how we kind of break it down for people there too. So we have a new patient system, we have a
Yep.
report of findings system, we have an
Hmm.
adjustment visit system,
Hmm.
progress exam system,
Hmm.
front desk operations, and that includes kind of scheduling and billing. We have team meetings and communication, and we have marketing and lead gen. So they're the 7 that we break it down. Now, whether you put in attraction, conversion, retention, there are lots of different ways that you're going to separate and perhaps pop these into silos. It doesn't really matter as
No.
long as you're covering everything that's kind of done on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That it has a level of reproducibility.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
about
essentially, there are 15 major functions in a chiropractic practice.
right.
And I'll bring this up here just for helping. Here and slideshow and
Why Malcolm is because again, systems is one of those things that's complicated a lot there too. When I think about a system, I think about it needs to have 3 things. It needs to have a trigger, steps, and outcome.
Mhm.
Okay. So the trigger might be, for instance, if it's the new patient greeting, all right, we've got a system and a standard operating procedure for that. What is the trigger? The new patient arrives at the office for their first appointment.
Mhm.
Now, the next thing I tend to do from here is work out what is the outcome I want from this. I
Mhm.
want the person greeted by name, I want them to feel welcome, all those type of things there too. And then I simply list out the steps. So if you think for each of these things that happen in your office, there's a trigger, there's an outcome, and there's steps. If you fill in those 3 things, it'll get you a long way going towards having systems for all of that stuff beforehand as well. So
Yeah.
for
So
those of you
this
that are
is
listening,
standard operating systems on every individual part. I mean, if you look
yes,
very high level, if you imagine you're a plane with 4 engines on it, you have a growth engine, you have a
yep,
delivery engine, you have a
uh huh,
people engine, and you have a money engine. And you want all those engines optimized because if one of those engines is operating at 90% or at 80%, or if an engine falls off, you're in trouble. So the growth engine is what you said before. This is around attraction, your marketing, everything. So how do you get more people in your business? Delivery engine, that's your deliverables. How do you create value, deliver value, great adjustments? How do you do everything within the practice? People engine, your people are everything in your practice. And then the money engine. How are you making sure that this business is a good business over time? So if you're looking high level, we look at the 15 major functions of a practice. This is happening in every practice, whether it's optimized or not. So you've got internal, external, digital in your attraction. In conversion, you've got your day one, day two, day three. You've got in retention, so your delivery system, continuing education, table talk, workshops, progress reports, examination, clinical services, re-examinations, whether it's annual or you're doing progress exams or whatever you're doing. It's your re-examination process. Then you've got your hiring on board, your team building, and then you've got your collections. So every one of these, just take it and say, is this optimized? In other words, what would you score this area out of 10? If you're not getting any external, and and you might score it a 1 or a 2. If you're very heavy internal, that might be a 10 or it could be a 9. But you don't want to have all of your new people coming in through only one source. What I'm seeing in the profession is people are heavily reliant on digital, and they're ignoring these other two. You want to have as close as possible an even split between all three. Because what happens if Facebook changes your algorithm or blocks your page or
mm,
whatever? You're not relying just on one basket to get your new people,
correct,
if that makes sense. So you
yep,
have to have
yep,
systems in all of them so that it keeps on happening. Make sense?
100%. And so we've now got, as we're building up the turn of value of our practice, we've got associates, they're cross referring between the two of them. We've got systems that are written down
Mhm.
that bring a level of predictability. And all of this means for me as the owner, if I'm about to step into it, that the person that had all the IP beforehand that's disappearing, that doesn't disappear with them. It's
Correct.
all here. So my investment I put in is not going to crash. It's not going to
Correct.
bring in half the income next month that it was this month also. What else? Anything else we need to kind of add to systems?
Well, you do need standard operating systems documented. That's
Yep.
massive.
Yep.
Leverage delivery, as I said, where it's not all done by you because no one wants to buy your business.
Yep.
You do need to have really good reporting systems and meeting rhythms. A lot of practices don't. they do not have enough of this. The distinction between meeting and a training. Some practices don't train at all, or they don't do meetings. So having these things in place makes it significantly more valuable over time. You need to have separate and distinct. And a team training is not just the doctors. A team training is everyone.
Mm.
What is the process that someone has when they go through your practice? And you're training on all those transition points. If it's like a Swiss watch, we do an office tour in our practice, and I know this is something new that we've done in the last number of years. And we regularly get referrals, and they haven't even met the doctor yet. It's because they see how professional we are. They're like, wow, 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 wow. And by the time they meet the doctor, they're just pumped. We
Mm.
train on the transitions because the practice will live and die in the transition between DC, CA to DC. You've got to have team training. Then you have individual training, doctor training for doctors on the procedures that underpin that process.
Mm.
CAs, the procedures that underpin that. You need both. That's training.
Can you differentiate a meeting from a training? What
Yeah.
separates those from you?
A meeting, if you look at a meeting, it's like family dinner. It's where everyone gets on the same page. It needs to be data driven. Because it needs to be data driven and it needs to be engaging for the whole team. It's like family dinner. Everyone's getting on the same page. We use a tool called the scoreboard, which is the most important metrics of the practice, and it's like you're on a footy field, and everyone's running around. They've got their individual roles and responsibilities. They've been hired to be a forward or hired to be a ruckman or whatever it is. That's their individual responsibilities, and then they look up periodically and they look at the scoreboard and they go, "How are we doing as a team?" That's what team meeting is about. How are we doing as a team, week by week, month by month? It's the most up-to-date data that you have. So we have a tool called the scoreboard to do that. So that's a team meeting. A team training is
So
like
let me
date
just
night.
stop on that for a moment or
Ah,
two. So the team meeting really is about assessing um, whatever you have as the key growth indicators: revenue, patients referred, volume, income, whatever KPIs that you have there in terms of the way that you're choosing to be scored. It's an opportunity for you to sit down as a team and look at, here's where we are, here's where we wanted to be. It's
yes.
that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's week by week.
Yep.
We set a goal of 20 internal referrals this month.
Yep.
In week one, we had five. Bingo, we're on track. Next thing. Or
Yep.
it's a two. This is an issue. We need to discuss this at the end of so a meeting is it's the data first, and then it's
Yep.
identify, discuss, and solve. So you're going to nut into the things that aren't working. So that's a meeting has to be data driven. It's the family dinner. Yes, you got to set the energy right at the start and finish with heart, but you're really going over the most current metrics of the practice. Where are we up to? So you can see the trends as they're happening
Mm-hmm.
week by week. Um, then a team training is date night. It's where the action happens. If with team training, it needs to be in situ. It needs to be happening exactly where it would be happening in the practice. Because as the Navy SEALs as the Navy SEALs say, when you're put under pressure, you don't go to what you know, you go to the level of your last training.
Mm-hmm.
When you're put under pressure, you go to the level of your last training. If you're not training and the whole team is involved and you have someone who's being the DC, someone who's being the CA, and everyone is watching and contributing to this, but they're going through there and everyone gives them feedback of how they're doing. And so you train and you don't train once and forget about it. You keep training because over time there is always drift. Humans are hardwired to be lazy and things will start slipping. They start bringing in words that shouldn't be there. I mean, not robotic. It doesn't have to be exactly to a script, but there's certain words that have to be there and certain words that should not be there. And that's what can happen. That's why you train in the position. If it's in the adjusting room, you do it in the adjusting room and everyone else is in there. If it's at the front desk, it happens at the front desk. This is date night. This is where the action happens. If you're not role playing, you are not training. I changed the word to scenario training because I found my team was resistant to role playing, called it scenario training, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. We're training on a scenario that's going to happen in the practice. Scenario
Yep.
training, we train every single week on scenario training. We follow a curriculum that we go through over 6 months. And what do we do at the end of the 6 months? We go back to the start and do it again
Yep.
and again. And this is where mastery happens.
Love it. Love it. So, folks, I'm hoping you can see that this practice that has all of these things in it and a team that's trained this way is valuable. And as Malcolm said beforehand, this not only makes your practice significantly more valuable when you sell it. But in the now, it has a huge difference on revenue, retention, enjoyment, impact. All of those things kind of happen along the way. There's not a reason to not do any of these things,
Correct.
as we go forwards there too. Um, I want to kind of wrap this up in terms of some of the things that we've spoken about
Yeah.
sort of so far. Um, and I guess really it is this idea that the things that you can do to really improve the revenue, sorry, the value
Yes.
of your practice.
Yes.
And we shouldn't wait until we want to sell it for us
Nope.
to start to work on these things. This is something that should be done from day one, is that you should be building this. And even if there's no desire for you to sell this for the foreseeable future, this is something that we want to kind of move forwards. Can
Yes.
we finish off with perhaps some of the hurdles that you see that practices come up against when they're wanting to move in this sort of direction? What do they
Correction.
need to
Yeah.
be aware of?
Yeah. The biggest hurdle is everyone wants to do it at once. Everything. Everything. I want this and this and this and this and this. So that's not going to happen. I love the Japanese word kaizen,
Yeah.
and which is a little bit of improvement every day. So what is the next thing? So as a business owner, you're always looking at brutal facts. Where is it now? Ultimately, where do I want to get to? That's I want this and this and this in here. And then you look at what's next. What is the thing that I want to do next? Do I want to add this or do this or do this? So you've got to chunk it down. And the biggest hurdle I have is people looking at everything I need to do and they're thinking that's too hard. I'm just going to keep doing it how I'm doing it now. And then they go to sell their practice down the track and it's worthless.
Mm,
Is you systemize one thing at a time is a way easier. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's always what is next. Um, am I going to start doing having some external marketing in my practice? Am I going to start doing some talk screenings? That might be next. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a system around this. But don't try and bite everything on at once because that's hard. The other part of this is setting making sure that there are KPIs in the practice that people understand they are accountable for. And so there's a difference between accountability and responsibility. Everyone's responsibility for internal referrals, but one person is accountable. So when you have a team, leverage operations is where people they know that that's the number. They want to make sure this is happening, but they don't have to do it all. So that's the key component to actually make it more valuable. And you can start that relatively quickly is start to get into delegation mastery or having other people empowering them as leaders so that they can take your practice forward.
What would be a reasonable time frame for somebody to go to a level of competence inside of things that we've spoken about now in terms of, leverage service systems, team meetings,
Yeah.
recording of data, KPIs, all those sorts of things?
I've got a coaching client in New Zealand, and when he came to me, he had a pretty great practice. He was seeing around 400 people a week with an associate, so pretty solid practice. When he came to me, he nearly didn't start because he thought, I've just had a baby, I don't have time. And I said, mate, you'll actually have more time because this is work you should be doing anyway. Let's make it
Mm,
focused. And he did this. His practice within a year is now above 800 a week with two associates. And he's put everything in place. Everything that I've talked about today he's got in place, and that's within a year. That is a very doable thing. This is
yeah.
not something that's going to happen in a month or in 2 months or in 3 months. But within a year, you can put a lot of this in place. It depends on how much you want to have a rock and practice. Remember, uh, no money, no mission. The more money that you make in practice, the more you can be mission driven. There's so much you can do in chiropractic and donate back and do whatever you want to do. What is your mission? What's your vision?
Mm. Malcolm, I feel like you and I could probably talk for hours here.
We could.
Um, and we might have to come back because what we've talked about here, building value into practice. One of the things that we haven't talked about is how do we even go about selling a practice? Because that's
Yeah.
another discussion that depending on the
Yeah.
interest we get from our listeners, we may
We
well
have
come
there's
back
a
again.
21 step roadmap that we have to what you have to go through to sell a practice. So that is another conversation. Yes.
Let's have that one sometime in the future, buddy. I want to just acknowledge and thank you for the brilliant brain that you have, for sharing it so widely with our profession, for the work that you've done volunteering across many spots, as well. Thank you so much for all of that, and thanks for sharing so generously with us here today. I get the feeling that we'll probably be back sometime later on this year for a round two on how do we go about selling the practice. If people are interested in kind of finding out a little bit more of the work that you do,
Mhm.
where do they find you? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so we're from the Remarkable Practice, so theremarkablepractice.com. And they can go onto that website and they can find it. If they want to jump on a strategy session, if they want to have an individual conversation with me, I'm more than happy to do that. So that's complimentary. It's just jump on where your points, I'll point them in the right direction. I can do that. So I'm not sure if you can put a link in to your podcast or whatever if they want to do that. So
Yeah, I'll make sure there's a link to that. And then if there's any ways that they can kind of fast track their way through to you, just check the show notes, gang.
yeah.
There'll be ways in there that you can contact
Yeah.
Malcolm.
Yep. And we also have we just had our team building event. We have our conversion retention immersion in Sydney in June. I think it's June 27, 28. It's 2 full days there. If they want to come along, just reach out to me through social media. Just search me on Messenger or Facebook and I can help you. Can even get you a ticket to that and they don't have to pay to go. So they can do that too.
Beautiful. Sounds like a wonderful way to kind of grow the impact, the income, and the enjoyment that chiropractors can have in their practice. Buddy, thanks so much for sharing today. I look forward to seeing you around the trap soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite, Angus.
See you, mate. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.